Hello, anatomy colleagues. This is Dr. Alsop, and in this video, we will be discussing the basics of the spinal cord. So after our discussion, we should be able to identify and describe the actual structure of the spinal cord. We'll talk a bit about the regional organization, particularly in terms of segments, which is kind of a complex idea. We'll talk a little bit about functional roles, the two enlargements, and a bit about the internal composition. If you remember, we did discuss the internal composition of the spinal cord a bit earlier on in the year, so that should be a nice review. All right, so we know hopefully at this point that the spinal cord is a component with the brain of the central nervous system. The nerves that are going to come off the spinal cord, so those spinal nerves, are going to be part of the peripheral nervous system. And the spinal cord is a major conduction pathway between the brain and most parts of the body. There's going to be portions of the head that is solely innervated by, say, like cranial nerves, but for the most part, the span of the spinal nerves is quite large. Also importantly, it's going to be a reflex center, so much more to come on reflexes in the weeks to come. But you can get myotatic reflex illustration over here. The spinal cord is located within the vertebral canal, so nice and protected by those vertebrae. And the spinal cord will begin at the foramen magnum of the occipital bone. So it's basically the continuation of the medulla oblongata. And it ends around L2 at the conus medullaris, which is just the tapered point of the spinal cord. Now, we know there are lumbar and spinal sacral nerves, so their nerve roots are going to be comparatively long in order to reach the appropriate intervertebral foramen, so to actually exit the vertebral column. So you see, say, the L5 portion from this L5 segment has a long way to go in order to actually exit from the intervertebral foramen associated with L5. So these roots from the lower lumbar, sacral, and that one coccygeal spinal nerve are going to be called the cauda equina. And cauda equina means horse's tail. So you can see all these roots kind of give the resemblance of a horse's tail. So speaking of spinal cord segments, there are 31 spinal cord segments, which are associated with the 31 spinal nerves. There are 8 cervical segments, which is one more than cervical vertebrae, of which there are only 7 cervical vertebrae. The first cervical spinal nerve will actually exit between the first cervical vertebra and the skull. So you can see that here, and then they'll kind of go from there. There are 12 thoracic vertebrae segments, which matches the 12 thoracic vertebrae. 5 lumbar. There's 5 lumbar vertebrae, 5 sacral segments, matching the 5 sacral vertebrae. And there is only 1 coccygeal segment, so only 1 coccygeal nerve. Now, note that the lumbar and sacral and coccygeal spinal cord segments, they have to be bunched up here at the bottom of the spinal cord. You can see that in this illustration over here. This image shows how those spinal nerve roots will exit. They have to travel a long way to get to their appropriate intervertebral foramen. There are 2 enlargements of the spinal cord, and these are caused by a proportionately larger gray matter collection related to the innervation of the limbs. So there is going to be a cervical enlargement of the C4 through T1 spinal segments, and this will innervate the upper limb. So that enlargement in this general region. And then you're going to have the lumbosacral enlargement, which is associated with the lower limb. And it's going to innervating the lower limb, and it's going to be from about T11 to S1 spinal cord segments. All right, let's talk a bit about the internal organization of the spinal cord. Unlike with the brain, the outer layer of the spinal cord is composed of white matter, and is organized into columns. So you can, this illustration shows the lateral column right here. And that columns are just going to be distinct bundles of axons, usually from a similar origin or destination or having a similar function. And these bundles are going to be called tracks as well. They're going to be sensory or ascending tracks and motor or descending tracks. The gray matter is going to be more internally located. Again, unlike the brain where the gray matter is more externally located. The gray matter is organized in what many refer to as a butterfly or H shape. And we discussed the gray matter back in block 2, but as a review, you're going to have the anterior or ventral horns, and these are going to be entirely somatic motor. So that's where these cell bodies are hanging out. So here are the ventral horns. The dorsal or the posterior horns are going to be composed of cell bodies of sensory neurons. So entirely sensory here. And then in certain locations, specifically the thoracic, superior lumbar to about L2, and sacral segments S2 through S4, they're going to be what's called lateral horns, where the autonomic nuclei are located. So this illustration on the right must not be in that level because we do not see the well, we see a bit of a lateral horn here. Apologies. So you can see a little bit of it kind of popping out. Generally, you have it shown in illustrations being a little bit more robust on the lateral side. So remember that the sympathetics, they're considered thoracolumbar, so T1 to L2, whereas parasympathetics are craniosacral. So certain cranial nerves will have parasympathetics associated with them, but also spinal cord segments S2 through S4 will have parasympathetics too. So these portions of the spinal cord will have lateral horns as well. All right, excellent. Hopefully you're feeling confident in some of the basics of the spinal cord. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I thank you so much for your time and attention.